Chapter 9 takes a look at ways that you can organize your speech. There is not necessarily one correct way or incorrect way to do this, but there are certainly ways that are going to be better or more effective or less effective. So what we're going to try to cover is understanding speech organization, and looking just very briefly at the difference between linear organizational formats, which is pretty much everything we're going to use, and something that's called configural formats, which is something that is used much less frequently in Western culture. So let's get started. Understanding speech organization. The way that you choose to organize your speech and the actual content of your speech are kind of equal partners in this speech development process. And in this course, I've said before, we are really looking at content and organization. The delivery, absolutely, that's an important part of any speech, but this is an introductory level class. Delivery gets better the more that you do it. But we really want to focus on organizing the content of your message. The ability to organize ideas into one or more effective patterns is absolutely critical for effective speech making. You may be an eloquent speaker. Let's say that you have no problem getting up in front of a class. You're saying to me, oh, I can talk in front of anybody. When I hear a student say that, usually the first thing that goes through my head that I never say out loud is, oh, darn, or something like that. Because these are the people that seem to have no problem getting in front of an audience and talking, but their organization is often so poor that it's not always easy to follow what they're saying. On the other hand, we have people that are great at organizing and the content is super. Maybe the delivery isn't absolutely perfect or could really be worked on. So they do all go hand in hand, but we really want to focus on the organization and the content. Developing an understanding of organizational patterns is going to make it easier for a speaker and a listener to follow the information that you're trying to present. And so it really is helpful for both, and therefore it is critical in order for effective communication to happen. So we often compare speech writing to writing an essay. I'm going to say this, it's said at different places throughout the course. Do not hand me an essay as your speech outline. An outline is not an essay. But the process you go through to create a speech outline is similar to the process you might go through if you were writing an essay, especially a research paper. And so there are some things that are similar, but there are many things that are different. In a speech, remember, we're only hearing this one time. We do not have the benefit of going back and rereading something if we don't understand. It's the M&M approach. You know, you got one shot to get it right. And so it's critical that this organization, this content, makes sense for an audience that's going to listen to your message, not hear or not read your message. Also, a speech outline is going to contain shorter sentences. Yes, I'm going to show you, and you'll see the difference between a preparation outline and a delivery outline. And that preparation outline does have a lot of complete sentences, but it's nowhere near what you'd have with an essay. A speech often should contain repetition. Again, remember, we get to hear it one time. When we can use repetition in a speech, it helps our audience be able to follow our message better. If you think about Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, he uses a lot of repetition. That leaves an impact on the audience. And the organization is kind of revealed naturally. We're not using headings and subheadings, so we're not saying, and now for my second main point, I will be talking about. Okay. We're going to try to be a little bit more subtle than that, although we want to be explicit that we're moving on to another main point. Okay, so there are some similarities and differences. One, we are not writing essays for this speech. We're going to use an outline format, and while it's similar to writing an essay, the product is not going to look quite the same. So we're going to use what's called linear organization. It's something that we do in Western culture. When I'm done here at the end, we'll talk a little bit about another strategy. But this looks at, we organize things from what are we going to have to be talking about, that we're going to then develop those main points. They're going to be directly related to the thesis or the topic, which we know right from close to the beginning, maybe not exactly at the beginning, but it's revealed in the introduction. And then we're going to build on that step by step by step. We're going to rely on facts and data to support each main point point and on transitions to bridge between those points. That's what a linear organizational format looks like. And so there's some different strategies we can use to do it. And what we choose to use is going to largely depend on our topic. So one way that we can organize is chronologically. Chronologically means that we organize by time. Or this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So you want to know the order of events and when they happen. An example that there is in the book is about ways that marijuana laws have changed dramatically since the early 1900s. So your main points are going to follow that chronological format. So we're going to start 19th century medicines. In 1910 this happened. In 1996 California did this. In 2012 Colorado did this. This is a chronological format. If you were to do a speech about how to make chicken marsala, that would be a chronological format. You do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich, we do this, then this, then this, then this. Those are all chronological formats. I don't often have students use this, but it is an option that's available to you. And again, it only works for certain topics. Another thing you can do is spatial order. This is where you can kind of observe the subject in space. So it's something that we're going from the front to the back, to the left to the right. Let's say that you are giving a tour of the campus. You are going to be using a spatial order to do that because you're going to say, okay, this is here, this is here, this is here, this is here. And the example that they have in the book is about the layout of the White House. So if you're doing a speech about the layout of the White House, you wouldn't have to. There's some other strategies you could use, but if you could organize this by saying, okay, in the East Wing, here's what that is, here's the residence, and here's the West Wing. That would be a spatial order. Certainly a topic, a large subject area like the White House, depending on how you approach it, you could use different organization patterns. Okay, the next one that you can order, and I'm going to skip around here a little bit from what the book does, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a topical order. Topical order, this is probably the most common pattern that I see, especially for the informative speech. So if it doesn't fit into a spatial, if it doesn't fit into a chronological, you're probably going to use a topical. This is when you have different topics. And I'll double back to that for a minute. So thinking about this for an informative speech, let's say that I wanted to do a speech about a particular dog breed, and I'm going to say, okay, here's the history of the breed, here are some characteristics of the breed, and here are some different ways that you need to take care of this particular breed. That would be a topical order. Or in the book, they look at, so eliminating meat from your diet has advantages and disadvantages. So there are 2 advantages, so there you go, advantages, and now there are disadvantages, and now there are 2 disadvantages. That would be an example of topical. Topical works great. This is what most of you will use for the informative speech. It's also something that can be used for the persuasive speech, and something that I am now allowing to be used for the persuasive speech. So we'll talk about that more with persuasion. One in the book, and I'm not going to talk about it here, is the problem effect, because I can't imagine anybody coming up with a topic for that. But something that you may use is a problem solution. In a problem solution, this is an organizational pattern that is a fantastic one to use for persuasive speech. You're going to identify that there is some problem out there, and then you're going to propose a solution for the problem. A little variation on this is you could have a problem and a cause and a solution. Here's the problem, here's the cause of the problem, here's the solution to the problem. Or you could have problem, solution, one possible solution, here, better possible, or better solution. So there are some variations we can take on that, and we can talk about that more when we get to persuasion. So for example, you want to convince your audience that national health insurance can help solve our healthcare problems. And so you have this thesis that the insurance will solve many of the problems caused by rising healthcare costs. So the problem, rising healthcare costs have resulted in an uninsured class of people. Wow, there's a problem. We have a bunch of uninsured people. The solution, need to implement a national health insurance single payer system so that will solve the problem. And then you're going to talk about, well, how can that happen? Something I will caution you about with using a problem solution, the solution needs to be manageable. You're never going to persuade people to take giant steps. And it has to be something that we can actually do. So I'm not sure how me as just this instructor at HACC can possibly do this, but maybe I could at least include in there, write your legislature, or go to a rally or something like that. All right, so those are 4 different strategies. There's chronological, there's spatial, there's topical, there is problem solution. So how you decide which one you're going to use is very much going to depend on your topic. These are all linear formats. We are very accustomed in the Western world to using linear formats because we tend to have low context cultures. We relay information explicitly. This is it. This is what I'm supposed to use. And we are going to summarize and offer explicit conclusions. These are all things we're going to do. If we're looking configural formats, this is something that relies a whole lot more on emotional appeals and stories to make a point. And while those strategies, especially in the persuasive speech, can really make a difference in a persuasive speech, it's not the only thing we're going to rely on. So with using linear organization, here is where the speaker is responsible. In Western culture, in the English language, the speaker is responsible for the language. But in other languages, in other cultures, including Japanese, Chinese, Arabic, they're much more listener responsible. The listener has more responsibility than the speaker does. For those of us who were born and raised in the Western world, it's kind of hard for us to get our head around this. But recognize that not every language is the same. The syntax of every language is not the same, and the way we structure every language is not the same. And so keeping that in mind depending on your audience. Okay, so just to summarize, understanding speech organization. Generally speaking, there's about 4 different ones that we're going to hear. We're using a linear organizational formats, but this is not the case across the whole world, so it's good to keep that in mind.